Howdy, folks. I'm Alex Simons. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the U15 Typhoon coach at Sudden Impact Volleyball in Bellevue, Washington. And I've been spending a lot of time lately experimenting with using kind of an ecological dynamics approach to coaching, along with some differential learning and constraints and the CLA approach. And so I thought I'd just start doing some videos sharing some of the things that I'm working on, what we're doing, and hey, maybe get a conversation started, see if some of others of you find this interesting or have other ideas that you want to share or suggestions. So my team, I'm going to start out and say my team just got done with our first major tournament of the year. I watched a bunch of the video on ball time and had a bunch of, looked at the stats, discussed it with the team. And there's a few areas that I really want to pay attention to in practice, or I really wanted to pay attention to in this practice I'm going to show you some of. So let me walk you through those areas and then show you as I walk through some of the video from the practice, kind of how I designed the practice to focus on those. So the first thing I noticed is that we served pretty tough. In fact, it was the main reason we won a bunch of matches this weekend. We served tough, but we served too many times into the middle third of the court. Like we let liberos pass the ball too many times. We served a lot of cross-court serves, but not nearly as many line-to-line serves as I'd like to see. And then we served a ton to kind of the 5-6 seam, but we didn't serve to zone 1 very often. In fact, we hardly served to zone 1 to the sideline or to the 5-6 seam at all. The 1-6 seam at all. So I'd like to see us do a lot more serving over there. So that was my first observation. Passing, we passed pretty well. It wasn't the best passing. It wasn't the best serving from our competitors. So, I'm not feeling amazing, but I'm feeling pretty good. We passed a 1.8 for the weekend. We did have a tough time with short serves. A lot of short serves got us. My passers continue to get, they get stood up on high deep serve. So they're in and, they're not taking it on a side, so their shoulders pop back and then they're passing it way up in the air. And then we had a lot of struggles passing balls that were served to our 1-6 seam. Probably not surprising given that in practice, we don't ever serve the 1-6 seam, so we don't get to pass the 1-6 seam very often. Those are kind of the things I wanted to focus on improving for practice tonight. Our attacking was quite good, but almost all of our attacks were kind of angle, deep corner, 5-6 seam. I mean, no complaints. We were hitting the ball pretty darn hard. But I'd like to see us get a much wider range. In fact, all of our hitters, except one, pretty much hit to the 5-6 seam or the deep corner nearly every single time. So I'd like to get them to swing a lot more line, a lot more sharp angle if we could. Today I decided to focus on line. And so that was those. And of course, like every team ever, we need a lot of passing and serving. I mean, no coach ever got to the end of the season and said, gosh, I wish I hadn't passed and served as much. A few other smaller things I noticed, I noticed that we lost a lot of the rallies when we were playing kind of like in a chaotic or broken scramble situation right close to the net. We did great on rallies on those kind of broken situations when we were away from the net, but when we were close to the net, we tended to be standing on the ground where our opponents were up in the air, being more aggressive. So I want to give the kids a chance to really work on getting up in the air, being more aggressive, pushing the ball, throwing the ball, dunking the ball, whatever, just something to get away from being caught by surprise and being down on our feet. We set way too many free balls, easy free balls over. I mean, we're sending some free balls, but I'd like them to be at least to more challenging spaces than just a free ball over to their libero so they can kind of jam it down our throats. Our back row attacking was surprisingly effective. I think we hit over 300 when we attacked from the back row. We just didn't do it very often. So I'd like to get them comfortable running that a lot more. And then lastly, our pins had a lot of success running flies or maybe a blue sometimes where they were coming over the top. But if the pass wasn't good, our middles weren't able to hit goes. So I need the middles to get better at being able to hit a go when we're out of system so that we don't get hurt too much because our outside hitters are not there. So that's kind of how I see the weekend. and kind of things that we need to improve on. And then I designed the whole practice today around the idea of, hey, how do we get really good in these areas? And I want to make sure I'm using a really, ecological dynamics-based approach with a whole bunch of differential learning opportunities as well. So let me walk you through kind of how our practice went. Okay, so before we get started on the specific activities, I do want to point out, like, this was a Saturday practice, and I usually try to use Saturdays to do a lot more kind of movement exploration and encourage the kids to try a bunch of new things or work on specific problems. So the Saturdays are usually not quite as 6-on-6 kind of game-like as I do on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and the kids kind of like it. It's not quite as intense as our normal Tuesday, Thursday practices, and they get to try a bunch of new stuff. In addition, for this practice, I only had 8 kids. Some of the other kids were out at a beach tournament. So I had to modify a bunch of drills and activities and stuff so that they could work with 8. But actually, I was pretty happy with how most of it turned out. With 8 kids, I was able to run all the kinds of activities I wanted today and not have anybody standing around waiting. So it was pretty cool. The first thing I'm going to show you, we started practice with just doing some volley tennis. I kind of like volley tennis. The kids think it's fun. It's a cool way to warm up, but it also is a good opportunity for them to try to be aggressive in terms of ways that they can send the ball over at their opponents to create pressure without, when we don't get a swing. And so you'll see as you watch, like, they're just playing they're volleying the ball back and forth, but increasingly as the drill went on into deeper and deeper rounds, and in this case, they were just playing for points, win by 2. As we went into deeper and deeper rounds, they got more and more creative about finding ways to attack that were not just sending a ball over. So they started setting balls over. They started doing, forearm passing, but deep and hard into the court. And then eventually they even figured out ways that they could, like, jump and swing. And so I was pretty happy with how that drill went. It gave them a lot of chances or that activity went. It gave them a lot of chances to try different explorations of different ways to, make it tough on your opponent, even if you didn't get a swing. Okay, so the second activity we did, I call it Monarch or maybe Queen of the Court or something like that in your gym. I like to start early in practices with this because it gets us playing, like, right away. We get some serve and pass, but it's pretty game-like. I always have a dedicated setter. A lot of times we'll have the middles playing a middle position and running quicks even. And it just gives us a way to get a lot of serve and pass in, but do it in a way that's really, game-like. In this case, we only had 8 kids today, so I had to change a bunch of things around, but I thought it worked out pretty well. First of all, I put in one constraint, which was that the servers had to serve the 1-6 seam, and that's because I wanted us to serve that seam more often, so I wanted them practicing it. But also, our passers struggled passing on the 1-6 seam over the weekend, so it was a good chance for them to just see more passes there, more serves there, and more chances to manage that seam, work on their overlaps. Next constraint I put in was that our setters were front row. So that meant that our second pin was always going to be the middle back passer and could only hit bicks or pipes. And again, that's another area I wanted us to work more and get more comfortable on. So they were having to pass that 1-6 seam and then go hit a bick or a pipe. And, I like that a lot. That was kind of forced a bunch of kids to try things that maybe they wouldn't normally do. And last constraint, since I only had 8 kids, the middles were playing pin hitters in this exercise. And so what I did was I told the middles that they had to be the passer in, the pin/passer in zone 5. So kind of like maybe like an OH1 pulled back to hit. And that gave them the chance to go run some goes, which we need to work on so that our outside hitters can, can come over the top into the middle without having to worry about passing because we were serving the 1-6 seam. So they knew that they would just be able to go hit goes. I thought the drill was worked out pretty well. Here we're seeing it here, and you can see that they're working on all the right stuff. Okay, so then next up was just a pure serve and pass drill. In this case, maybe not the most game-like situation, but at least all the servers had passers to aim at, and all the passers had targets. But here I was trying to apply a lot of CLA and differential learning with an external rather than internal focus. So one of the things I noticed this weekend was that I told you was that our kids, when they were passing, kept getting stood up, like balls coming high, and they couldn't keep the ball in front of them. We were popping balls up. So for this drill, when they were passing, they had a T-shirt that we draped across their back, and we were just telling them, hey, don't let the T-shirt fall off. And because of that, they kind of have to keep their shoulders forward and keep a more hunched position when they're passing. And you can see they just explored all kinds of movement patterns that let them keep their shoulders forward while getting the platform on the ball. And very few of them got blown up by deep serves because of that. So I thought that was pretty cool. I really like that. And it was a way that they could have an external cue for how to keep their shoulders forward rather than me telling them, hey, keep your shoulders forward, which isn't super effective. The other thing was that we were doing what I call Goldilocks serve passing here. So the coach standing next to the player was prompting them to do one of 3 different kinds of passes: a pass that was a deliberate overpass, a pass that was high straight up to themselves, and then a pass to their target. And this is just an attempt to introduce some randomness and exploration of the solution space so that they kind of get a better idea about how their platform works and what the options are, and maybe find some things that don't work and some things that do work, and just get better at it. All of the differential learning science kind of says that exploration of the solution space is a great way to learn how to do this. So let's go ahead and watch the drill. You'll see it's just a standard serve and pass, but each of the kids has a T-shirt on their back, and they're doing this variety of pass to yourself, pass over pass to target, and the coaches are mixing up which one. It's not just always in order. It's kind of like trying to give them a random order in which to do it.
That's a pretty good serve, man. Keep working. Hey, rotate.
Okay, next up, I wanted to do some kind of drill or some kind of activity. I keep using the word drill, but I mean activity. Some kind of activity where the kids got to compete, but because of the constraints, were forced to play kind of chaotic short, close to the net volleyball, and work on how to get up and joust and push and things like that, instead of being just standing on the court on our heels. So what I did was I set up little baby courts. These courts were 16 feet deep and 10 feet wide. So it's basically just a very narrow court and 6 feet deeper than the 10-foot line. And the rules were that it was a 2-touch game. You had to receive and then attack in 2 touches. And then coaches were entering the balls because I didn't want to worry about how do you manage passing in that case. So a coach entered the ball and they just played the points out. And we were encouraging them to be aggressive. We were continually encouraging them to look for ways to throw balls down or to hit a ball. So we were just being like, hey, come on, be more aggressive, be more aggressive. Can you throw that ball down? Can you hit that ball? Can you find a way to make that harder? So just encouraging them to try to explore more aggressive ways to play the game. So, hey, we'll take a look at that. I felt like this drill worked really well. They went from playing kind of like patty cake in the first, round to, actually doing some pretty aggressive movements, much more aggressive than we ever have done before by the time we had played 4 rounds. And all we did here was we just played games to 5 points, win by 2. Okay. Next activity we did, I wanted to get some kind of activity that was going to encourage the hitters with constraints to really work on hitting line instead of hitting cross. And I was also looking for something that was going to encourage our servers to do much more kind of straight ahead, line to line serving, or at least into the seam serving, rather than doing cross court serving. We just did a ton of cross court serving this weekend. I didn't think it was super effective, or at least not as effective as I would like. So I decided we were going to play narrow court doubles. So we used the baby courts again, but this time we played the full depth of the court, all 30 feet, but only 10 feet wide. And the kids are playing doubles. There are no constraints on this except for the width of the court. And what it's doing is it's forcing the outside hitters to have to hit line, or at least to have to hit very straight ahead. And it's forcing the servers to serve into a pretty narrow channel. And again, we just played doubles to 5, win by 2. I think we did 8, win by 2 in this case. And the one thing we told the kids was they'd probably have more success if one player was in the back passing and the other player was forward, kind of as the setter. So take a look. I was really, really happy with how this drill worked, particularly Molly, who's our super aggressive, small outside hitter, kind of struggled at first to find a way to hit. She really only knows how to hit cross court. And by the end of the drill, she actually had a couple of really nice line kills, and I don't think I've ever seen her have a line kill before. So let's take a look at that. Again, just another way to use a court size constraint to force the kids to work on and explore some movements that they don't normally do.
Nice pass, Ella. Hey, switch.
Okay, and that was pretty much the whole practice. We ended with 10 minutes of kind of strength training. We did a bunch of like what I call floor work. So they did some lunges and bear crawls and worked on going down on one knee and stepping through that. They worked on some getting their torsos, getting more shoulder and hip separation in their torso, building up some core strength and stability. So that was about a 10-minute activity at the end of practice, and then we were done. So anyway, that's our practice for tonight. I felt pretty good about it. I talked to the assistant coaches afterward. We all kind of felt like we could see really dramatic changes, and in terms of the solutions the kids were trying. They all were forced to try brand new things they haven't really done before. Particularly some of the outside hitters, when they were hitting line, made really big improvements really fast. And I felt like the Goldilocks serving with their t-shirt on was also super effective. A couple of our passers who normally really get blown up a ton, even though our servers were serving pretty tough, managed to keep in and pass much more effectively than they did this weekend. So anyway, that's that. If you haven't got any questions, let me know. Of course, I would love to get any feedback or suggestions you've got, or hey, share some of the things that you're working on. So thanks a ton, and I hope to do some more of these again soon.